Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast, episode number 115. It's Wednesday. That means we're coming at you with another episode that's just a bit extra special. It's July 6th, 2021. It's time for another Reddit Roundtable. I'm joined by, as always, I don't know why I always throw a "by" in there for some reason.
Yeah, whatever gets the job done.
I'm joined, as always, by Dominic Salee. I'm Noah Baker. Dom, how are we feeling? It's been a week since we last saw each other. It's been a bit of a – we're finally getting some more news coming out, but otherwise been a very dull week to be an MMA fan, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, as bad as we wanted to do a Friday episode or Monday of this week, there just wasn't quite a – there was – a good chunk, but not enough for a whole episode worth. So we're just going to throw it all in for this coming Friday's MMA weekend preview. Nevertheless, it was a tough week without you, Noah. So I'm so glad we're back here in the studio. And it's your baby, the Reddit Roundtable. It's going to be a good day.
Yeah, I also realized I kind of messed up at the beginning. You guys
we are recording on the 6th.
On July 7th, 2021. So, but it's good to be back here with you. It's felt a little longer than just a week this time.
It did.
And I think a lot of that's just because there was no UFC to watch this weekend, no Bellator, no PFL.
No nothing.
There was no real – the news was finally over the last couple of days started to pick up a little bit. But, otherwise, just not a ton going on. But it's the calm before the storm right now.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Because we know that even though we're saying this, it's fight week again.
It is.
And not just any fight week. It's a Conor McGregor fight week. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
And it's a huge, probably, dare I say, one of the biggest fights of his career as he goes up against Dustin Poirier for the third time. Dustin coming off of his biggest win of his career, knocking out Conor McGregor in their previous outing. So they're going at it again. We're going to have a lot of questions about UFC 264 on this episode. So we'll be getting into it quite a bit here, but obviously Friday will be the big weekend preview, and it's going to be all about UFC 264. Now, for those of you that don't know what Reddit Roundtable is, if this is the first time you're watching one of these, essentially we scour the internet to the bowels
everywhere,
to the bowels of the internet, whether it's Reddit, Twitter, Instagram. Sometimes I find them on some random YouTube videos. Anywhere I can find someone asking a question relating to MMA, I will use it. Yes, viewer questions. We got one of those today as well. I will use it, and we basically pull together about 10 to 12 of them, and we just talk and give our thoughts on them. The hope is down the line that more and more viewers will start just sending us their own questions, and we can just turn this into our own community-based Q&A type sessions. And so otherwise, if you would like to leave us your own question for a future episode, you can do so if you go to either of our Instagram or Twitters. They're linked right there if you're watching. If you're not, he's at DSalee14. I'm at NTBaker_, or you can go to the Below Average Joe's Twitter, Instagram at BAJ_MMA podcast. There are links in our bios for the link tree, which contains links to the Anchor page where you can leave a voice message, or you can comment on this video or any YouTube video, comment on our post on our social medias, leave a question, and we'll make sure to include it in a future Reddit Roundtable. Did I cover everything?
Very well said. I say we get into it.
All right, so we're going to start right here at number one. I think we'll do our viewer question last. Is that?
Yeah, that's what we did in the last one, so we'll just keep it like that.
All right, so number one, and we're coming out heavy right here.
Yeah.
Does having interim titles, and maybe I should set this one up. We recently had an announcement. I need to do a little better about that. Recently,
it sucks because this we have to talk about on Friday.
Yeah, so we won't touch too much on the announcement itself, but just to give some basis for why we're even talking about this. We just had a recent announcement for a good fight at heavyweight for an interim title between Ciryl Gane and Derek Lewis. Very controversially, I might add.
Yeah.
This fight has been put together at least for the interim title. That's the controversial part. So the question that's been presented here to us, Dom, does having interim titles ever matter, or are they always pointless?
So, if the grand scheme of interim titles, this is essentially a number one contender fight, if you will. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
One of the most recent ones that are just coming to mind fresh off, and it's because he's fighting this weekend, was Dustin Poirier against Max Holloway due to Khabib's extended absence. A lot more going on in that one, though, with Khabib. He was suspended with all the crazy stuff that happened in the Conor aftermath. So that one made sense. You need someone to at least have an interim belt to determine who's going to fight for the undisputed. But really, at the end of the day, you don't even need a gold belt. It's just a number one contender fight. That's all it is. Is it pointless? This one feels pointless. The one that we're going to talk about Friday between Lewis and Gane feels very unnecessary, very pointless.
I think this is a very egregious example.
Yeah, it's one of the most unexpected, unnecessary ones.
So in terms of just some of the other ones we've seen, like I guess the way, not just the UFC, I mean, Bellator just brought in their first.
Like that makes sense, you know?
I guess for me, maybe I'm a little harder on these titles because I personally just look at it like you have one champion, right?
Yeah.
Now, I understand where I think an interim title can be of value or be worthwhile is if you have let's say back when Anderson Silva in like 2011, you know, the guy had held the belt for how long at that point? 5 years?
Was on the tear, yeah.
You know, just at the peak of his stardom. Let's say he goes down with like a torn ACL or something, out for 12 to 15 months. In that situation, you put an interim title in place because you don't want to strip a long-standing champion.
Right, yeah.
But you want to give other guys an opportunity to fight for a title.
Yeah.
So then it's still, in a way, it doesn't feel – it's never to me, though, going to feel like
real,
a legit title.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way to really fix that. I really don't, because you crown a champion, so then you go, well, this is the champion because they are not available. Right. So you're basically saying this is the second best that our division has to offer. It inherently feels less valuable. Like anytime someone retires and their resume might have an interim title, I still just look at it like they never won a title.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I told you, we talked about Dustin Poirier, and we're going to talk about this on Friday, so I don't want to like get too much into this. But for Dustin Poirier, we talked about like if he wins Saturday, you know, what could that do for him in terms of top
legacy.
10, all-time status? And I said, well, I would never put someone in my top 10 who never won a title.
An undisputed title, yeah.
But he did win an interim title. That's just, to me, that's just that it wasn't intentional for me to say it like that. It just, that's how it came off, because that's
I
just
see
how
the point, though, you know?
Yeah, I get, though, where I do think that at times they've definitely improved cards or products. Prime example, UFC 236. Headlined by 2 interim title fights, and are 2 of the best fights of all time.
Yeah.
Think about it. If there's no interim titles on that card, Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum is a 3-round fight.
Yep.
So just for that reason, I mean, just because that, and then Poirier Holloway, which was the main event, so it would have been 5 rounds anyway, but regardless, fighting for an interim belt. Just for that, those 2 fights, I'll say that they do have value, and that I don't want to see them go away, but I just want them to be more selective, I guess.
Yeah.
And I get it. At the end of the day, you want to put a title on these cards to boost its value, get some pay-per-view buys up. So I'm sure that's part of the reason, because this August card, we know Nunes
and Pena.
Nunes is not really able to quite carry a card by herself. Just over the past. So I see why the UFC is doing it. In this case, it's just, I'm not a huge fan of interim titles, just being honest, but I don't want to see them go away either, because we might miss out on some amazing fights. Like,
it's a very, like, touchy subject because there are points where it would make sense where your champion's inactive or injured and you're solidifying, okay, this guy is for sure going to be next up. We're going to unify the belts. But then you have instances like the one with Lewis and Ngannou we're going to talk about more Friday that's just literally Ngannou just won the belt in March. And you're telling me in August you have to put a belt on the line. It's just it's very selective, and I don't want to see them just pop up out of the blue all the time. If it's going to happen, it needs to be very specific why. There better be a super long layoff for your champion or something that's come up, but you can't just be handing them out like candy. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a gold belt. So it's
true. It's true. I think we'll save the rest of that topic for Friday because I know we're
trying to hold back.
Yeah, we're trying to hold back there. Number 2. Now, half of our main event is really the whole effing show, right? Conor McGregor, the biggest star in UFC history. We've talked about him a few times on here. We've seen a different side of Conor McGregor in his last couple fights. Against Cowboy Cerrone, and then the last one with Dustin Poirier. We saw a very humble Conor McGregor, very mature, a guy, a family man, if you will, whatever you want to call him. But we know that one of the big things that really catapulted Conor McGregor into the superstar he is wasn't just how good he looked in the octagon. It was how he talked the talk out of the octagon in these press conferences. I don't think you'll ever see someone replicate that kind of success that he had with press conferences and how he was able to really build a fan base out of his words.
Yeah.
With that being said, this third fight with Dustin Poirier, they feel a little less, there's a little bit less, respect, chummy. These guys have got, there's been a lot of words shredded this time. You look at Dustin Poirier when he kind of called out Conor for not the charity stuff, and Conor did not take too well to that.
Yeah.
There's been some words being, some slight jabs being thrown on Twitter and stuff. So my question is, Dom, what expectations do you have for Conor McGregor at this week's UFC 264 press conference?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any buddy. No hot sauces given out at the ceremonial weigh-ins, no hugs or anything like that. But at the end of the day, he also is coming off of a knockout. So can he say that much to Dustin Poirier? I think there will be slight jabs. I mean, we saw what he did on Twitter last night.
Well, I was going to say the second Nate Diaz fight, he didn't back down. And that was coming off a fight he got submitted in.
True. I guess in that one, a little bit more room for excuses for him as well. Not saying he made excuses, but I don't know. I'm not saying he won't come out and talk shit. He's gonna. It's just, you see it on Twitter, on Instagram. It's going to happen. He said a lot of pea-head. He's calling him a hillbilly. Some interesting wordplay from Conor, not like we've seen before.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so that Dustin's just going to come out and not really care and just kind of let it all go by the wayside. Now, will it actually, or will it be in his head and he just chooses not to show it? Because we know in the first fight, Conor was in his head and it was over before the fight even started. So Dustin is more mature now, and so he says, I don't really care which version of Conor shows up. It's all noise to me. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be anything like too bitter like the one with him and Khabib. That was just uncomfortable. I don't think we'll ever really see something like that again. But it's not going to be the Conor of the last press conference. That I can tell you, there will be shit spoken, and it will not be nice from McGregor this time.
Yeah, I definitely think that's kind of a given, right? That I don't think you're going to see Conor play it super, I guess, mature, nice, or whatever, however you want to word it. It's kind of weird even. I feel weird even like kind of indulging myself in this because it makes me feel like this is all pre-planned or something, but it's not, I don't think. But for Conor, what I foresee here, I think he's still going to be more mature.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a lot of like subtle jabs. Like a lot of that, like he'll talk very calmly rather than his usual, back in the day anyway, aggressive vigor.
Yes.
You're just going to see someone like who he's going to speak with a little salt behind his words. It's just going to be like, it's going to be like these jabs that everybody knows is like a jab, but he's just going to play it off like he's just speaking facts or whatever.
Yeah.
And, Dustin, he's admitted in the past he hates all the fight week stuff that doesn't involve the fight itself. So he's not going to be enjoying himself in any of these press conferences or the weigh-ins, none of that. Body language experts, be warned, stay away.
Yeah.
You can't look at Dustin Poirier's posture or the way his eyebrows move at the fucking weigh-ins.
Is he making eye contact?
It's just the guy does not enjoy the promotional side of the sport, so it's just not going to look well. But I'm looking forward to this press conference. I'll admit it. The last one, look, as much as I've been maybe a critic at times of some of these guys that tend to just really talk a lot of shit and it just feels fake and forced, that last press conference was kind of boring. So it was a lot of respectful. The best thing that came out of the last press conference was Dan Hooker calling Charles Oliveira Charlie Olives.
Yeah.
It was the best thing that came out of that whole press conference for me.
Yeah, man.
So if this one, I'm at least more intrigued to watch it. I'll admit that.
I mean, at the end of the day, when would we ever pose this question for any other fighter unless it's Conor? Like, oh, what do you think?
It feels weird.
So-and-so's going to do at the press conference.
That's why it feels weird talking about it.
It really is just a Conor McGregor fight week. It's such an aura. You just feel it all throughout the week. We're all the way over here in Ohio. We're not even in Vegas for the fight week or nothing. And you just feel like something special is happening. It's always this way.
Yeah. Sticking with UFC 264, but looking more at the undercard. We have a lot of prospects that are looking to really break out here, getting quite a rub, quite a shine on a Conor McGregor card. And my question is, which prospect with the win on Saturday should be on everyone's radar?
Well, no, I'm going to go with the 24-year-old undefeated 10-0 Ilia Tupiria. He's going up against Ryan Hall, one of the most dangerous submission aces in all of the UFC. This guy's 8-1, 36 years old, a true veteran, but we just haven't been able to see him fight very much. And we're going to probably talk about this a little bit on Friday at least, but this is a guy that has had so much untapped potential. We'll never truly get to see how great Ryan Hall could have been, no matter how much he continued. Yes, right. But for Tupiria, 24 years old, but he's already getting a billing on a Conor McGregor card on the prelims against a guy like Ryan Hall. I think it's saying a lot for what the UFC thinks in terms of a high ceiling for Tupiria. And truthfully, I think he can really come out here and make a statement. It's a name that you're going to want to have on your radar should he get the job done against Ryan Hall.
Yeah, for Tupiria, the guy looks like a beast. He's quite the buzzsaw. He's
so well-rounded.
Really good everywhere. But we know how specialized Ryan Hall is. We know what he's going to want to do here. He's going to look to pull guard or drag down Tupiria into his game. His jiu-jitsu is spectacular. There's no doubt about it. He's a better striker than, someone like a Damian Maia. So he's at least a little more modern, but he recognizes where his path to victory is, and he really only looks to win in that way.
Right.
So with a matchup with Tupiria, it's dangerous for both guys. I mean, Tupiria is actually a 2-1 favorite going into this fight.
Is he really?
And I'm shocked.
Wow.
I'm really shocked by that he is actually quite a favorite. A lot
of recency bias playing in there, when you haven't seen Hall fight in 2 years, I guess. That's shocking.
It's weird because for a guy like Ryan Hall, who has fought so scattered about the last 5 or 6 years, has really never stayed consistent with any sort of fighting schedule. Yet his name still comes up all the time because the hardcore fans
they know how good he is. Yeah,
they love Ryan Hall, and I think that there is something to be said about. You have a guy like Tupiria who's very well-rounded, very good everywhere, but yet the best skill that either guy brings to the table is Ryan Hall's jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, if Ryan Hall gets it into his
realm,
yes, thank you, then it's going to be a tough night for Tupiria, but it's just about getting the fight there. Right. I do think Ilia Tupiria, with the win here, huge win.
Oh,
a name that is so respected among the hardcore fan base. It might not be someone that a lot of these casual fans that are going to be watching for Conor McGregor, they may not know Ryan Hall, but a huge name among hardcore fans well-respected, former Ultimate Fighter season winner.
Yeah, he's a guy that a lot of people, you talked about it off recording, a lot of guys that are ranked in this division don't want to fight Ryan Hall. So part of the reason of his inactivity is, yes, he gets injured and has bad luck, but also he seems to have a hard time getting fights. So,
and I do think that I said this when he beat BJ Penn, and then when he beat Darren Elkins after, I said, if this guy gets more consistent, I think he could really still make a run, even though at that time he was already 33, 34.
Yeah.
Now he's 36. You would think that, like, the door's about shut on, like, any sort of title aspiration or anything like that. But with the guy, he is such a puzzle, man. And I think that's why he's had a lot of injuries, but also just a lot of people have not wanted to fight him.
Yeah.
The fights he has gotten, a lot of times they've fallen through, whether it's because of him or his opponent. He's had a lot of bad luck, is what I'm saying. And people recognize how good he is, and nobody, let's be honest, I would rather get knocked out 100 times than have my knee blown out by
and all my ligaments are torn and bones are broken.
I'm sorry. It's just you're not going to convince me otherwise. So in a way, and this will get into a question later, he might be the most terrifying fighter just for that,
right?
Just for what he can do to your limbs.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm going to give a shout to another fight on the undercard. Trevin Giles and Dricus du Plessis. These are both prospects.
Really the winner of,
It's really the winner of this fight, and I'm not saying this guy's going to win, but I'm going to pick this fighter because I think his ceiling might be just a bit higher right now in my head. Dricus du Plessis coming off a huge knockout win over the Joker. What's his name? The guy that dresses up like the Joker.
Oh, Perez. Marcus Perez.
Marcus Perez. Thank you. So, that's a guy who's been around for a while in the UFC. Dricus looked amazing in that fight. Guy comes in with quite a pedigree to him. He's a really good kickboxer. I foresee if a win here, I think this guy's knocking on the door top 15 already. And that's only 2 fights into his UFC career. So it's obvious, even with Trevin Giles, this might be, I don't know off the top of my head, it's like his 3rd or 4th fight in the promotion. So it's obvious the winner here is the UFC might be buying in a little bit to him. So
that's a battle of prospects, truthfully, that one. Yeah,
for sure. Moving on from there, we're gonna get away a little bit from UFC 264 for a second. We'll come back to it, but just some more fun ones. So we'll be the first to admit MMA is really kind of the explosion of MMA into the mainstream is more of a recent phenomenon. It's really a 10 years or so. The last decade has really been the biggest growth, and to the point where, like, you could reasonably ask a person on the street if they knew what UFC was or MMA was, and they would probably be able to at least give you something. So because of that, this question involves recent years. So we'll say since 2010 or whatever. Why have we not gotten more movies about MMA? And I think to kind of to put this question into under a microscope, compare it to boxing, where boxing movies have remained consistent over the last decade or so, and
have some classics too.
And classics, you got the Rocky movies of before, but in recent years you got the Creed movies. Southpaw is one that you talk about, how much of a fan you are. I really liked it too. I feel like I've seen some other boxing movies that were really good, but regardless, they've remained more consistent over the years. While for MMA, there's 2 movies that I can tell you off the top of my head, and that's Warrior in 2011, and then Here Comes the Boom, the Kevin James comedy vehicle in 2012. You had Foxcatcher. That was a movie about Olympic wrestling back in like 2015, but more so because not really about it. It's Olympic wrestling involved, but not. It's explained unless you've seen it. So, what do you think, Dom? What's the real reason here? Why are MMA? It feels like it's just as popular as boxing. Why can't we get MMA movies?
I think it is just because it's still not as mainstream as basketball, as football. I mean, for example, we're getting a Space Jam movie remake here in July, literally this month, so a basketball movie. and football, baseball, all that stuff. It's still not there, obviously, right? So I'd say that's probably the biggest reason. And also just like, do actors want to partake in MMA movies? And because I know like Halle Berry did a movie with Valentina Shevchenko. It's not out yet, but like she had to go through and do all the MMA training and wanted to make sure everything was right and stuff. So I'm sure that plays a factor. Do actors want to fully indulge into essentially becoming an MMA fighter for 5-6 months, however long it takes to shoot the movie? And of course, the Kevin James movie is kind of a comedy at the same time, but I'm sure he even had to do at least a few things here and there physically. So maybe that's a factor. But yeah, the biggest thing has got to be just mainstream. How many eyes are we going to get? Are we going to really bring people into the box office to see an MMA movie? And I know we're talking about movie. I will say there is a really good show, Kingdom, based on MMA, had some pretty big name actors and actresses. I enjoyed that one. Unfortunately, that got canceled even after 3 seasons. So even a show-wise couldn't go super far. I think it is just the sport is not quite on the level of even the boxing and the basketballs and footballs and all that stuff. But as the sport continues to evolve, as younger fans pick it up, that's what will, I think, push it forward in the future, is the younger generation getting behind it now. So
yeah, from my side, I'm not going to compare it to like basketball, football, baseball, because I mean we're still a ways away from that level of popularity. But I do think there is something to be said. Why is it that boxing remains so consistent at the movies and not MMA? And I think the biggest reason for that is boxing has proven through the Rocky movies, and I mean you've got movies like Cinderella Man's really good.
Yeah,
they've proven that they perform well at the box office. They've proven it. However, MMA movies, and I just mentioned too, Warrior, I know, did really poorly at the box office. I don't know about Here Comes the Boom. Kevin James, maybe it did all right.
At least a big name person, but
yeah. But I don't remember it being a big movie. I'm a guy that follows.
Oh, you're a big movie guy.
Big movie guy, so I definitely follow it. And I don't remember, that movie was definitely kind of a blip on the blink and you miss it type movie. So I think a lot of it's just MMA's not proven that it's valuable as a entertainment asset. As you would think though, now that they have this new ownership group that came in 2016 that are so heavily involved in Hollywood and
entertainment in general,
you would think that there would be a push for that. We did have talk of The Rock doing a Smashing Machine Mark Kerr movie. That's kind of fallen off the face of the earth, and ever since that got announced, I've not heard anything about that movie ever since. But it's The Rock. That man's out there doing a million things at once. So
I will say, while we're on movies, we do see a lot of MMA fighters though branch out and do movies, not MMA movies. But like Bisping, Max Holloway, Valentina's doing the Halle Berry movie.
Well, even back in the day, Randy Couture was in the Expendable movies. Rampage Jackson was on the A-Team movie, did the Mr. T rule.
So we have seen that. So, I don't know, man. It is just kind of a question that's up in the air. Will we see more in the future? Yeah. Will they flop? Just maybe. We'll see. There'll never be another Rocky, that's for sure.
Well, there could – hey, man, look, I'm a huge Rocky fan.
It would be cool to have the MMA version of Rocky.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it just maybe the sport's still just like Rocky. Just it feels so triumphant. Like classic. I don't know if MMA can really feel like that yet.
Build that storyline. Find that right person.
MMA, because you look at MMA and its roots are in, like, honestly, it's kind of cleaned itself up over the years. But it started as being viewed as, some of it's own promotional fault, as the seedy, underground, fight to the
barbaric.
death. So it's cleaned itself up to a point now, or at least in people's eyes, it's became a cleaner sport, even though it's really the same thing. So I don't know. Maybe you can't really do a boxing's version or an MMA's version of Rocky, because Rocky just feels so classic, so clean, so I don't know how to explain it. It just feels, there's a certain feeling in that movie that I don't know if can be replicated in a sport that's so as new, as ripe as MMA is, but I want an MMA movie right now.
Yes, the next big hit, we'll do a movie breakdown whenever the time comes.
Dwayne Johnson, get in there, brother.
Yes,
grow that hair out. We need you to be Mark Kerr, damn it.
Yes, come on.
Now, moving on from there. This is a question I teased just a little bit ago, talking about Ryan Hall. We have seen, Dom, some scary fighters come through MMA over the years. Some have at times fallen off and have become a little less scary, but some have maybe remained just as intimidating day one as they were when they walked out the door. So my question is, over the course of MMA history, who and kind of when, I guess, if it has to be, branched out that far, who is the most intimidating fighter in MMA history?
When I see the question, is it fair for me to just answer what comes to mind right when you ask?
I think that's a good way to do it.
And I mean, hopefully it's not the most obvious choice, but I mean, I kind of have to choose Francis Ngannou. I mean, we're talking about a guy with absolute one-punch power. He literally has 15 or 16 professional wins. All of them are via finish, and like 12 of them are by knockout. He just destroyed our guy Stipe Miocic. As much as I hate to say it, this dude is truly terrifying. Outside of his fight with Miocic the first time and the first Derek Lewis fight, those are, we don't talk about those. But when he wins, he does it in dominating fashion. He takes people's heads off. I mean, my God, he took Alistair Overeem's head and knocked it into the second row of the arena. Then it's just this dude, when he touches you, it seems like you fall. And we don't see that often, even throughout 28 years of UFC history, even MMA history as a whole. You don't see that very often. I have to go Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, I don't want to if it's an obvious one, if it's the most obvious one, there's probably a good reason for that.
Yeah,
because a lot of people agree with you. Since I found the question, I obviously was able to think about it a little bit longer. So my answer was I tried to dig a little deeper, I guess, and not. So I can't really go right off the top of my head. But when I thought about it, I was like, okay, kind of what makes someone, because I legitimately would probably be more terrified to be put in a cage with someone who would submit me, at least an arm bar or a leg lock, than someone who would knock me out. I legitimately am more terrified of my limbs being pulled off my body. So someone like Ryan Hall almost would scare me more to fight him than Francis Ngannou.
And then you put them next to each other. You're like, wait, are you sure you want to choose?
Which I don't, but I still see the point for Ngannou. I mean, physically opposing, the one-punch power, the way I say that, but I don't want my toes to curl like Alistair Overeem did back in the day. That's that. I don't want to be stiff as a board now. So when I think about it, it's just who had the presence for me. When I watched them get into the cage, or in this case, ring. When it's just, you just immediately felt this ominous presence of you, oh my God.
There's just a dark cloud over your head.
You just feel like there's something evil about that man. Yeah. And that's going to be the Pride era. Axe murderer himself, Wanderlei Silva.
I can't let you get close.
See, that made him a little less scary. Once Chael got top mount with some flip flops, it just.
Hence why Noah chose the Pride era version.
But Pride era Wanderlei Silva, there's nothing like him, man. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but a guy who, when he came in, his face said murder. He just said, "I'm going to murder you." That's It's intimidating to me that a guy could flip it. To have that kind of mentality, that when you're in the cage, or when you're in this case the ring, you just flip a switch and it's I am not going to stop. If this ref doesn't pull me off, I'm not stopping.
He chose violence every time he stepped into an octagon or cage or a ring.
And I mean, that just scares the shit out of me. That a guy has to. That's what the referee it felt like for a Wanderlei Silva fight, the referee was put in there because if legitimately, if there was no ref in there, he's not stopping.
Yes, I feel bad for the referees that had to do his fights because they were probably just on their toes, so antsy the whole week leading in.
Yeah. I was very close when I first started watching, before I kind of went back and watched a lot of the Pride fights of old and stuff. Yoel Romero was the one for me. That's a guy who scared the shit out of me. However, kind of like Ngannou, their personalities outside of the octagon are so lovable.
Gentle giants.
Yeah, that it's like, okay. I mean, sure, do they turn it on in the cage? Yes, yeah. But it makes me feel a little more like comfortable.
Can I give one honorable mention?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it just dawned on me, and this might be kind of an interesting one. I want to see what you think here. The Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now think about it here. This is a guy that's not going to come out and one-punch KO you, snap your arm off of your body. But this is a guy that when it's fight week, this dude is untouchable. Like, when he would come out and say these things, like, I'm going to drag them into the ocean and drown them. And then he just has this ability to go into the octagon and drain someone's will, drain their spirit from their body, and he can just do whatever he wants to you, and you essentially have no answers. That in itself is kind of scary to think about. Again, not the guy that's going to go out and one-punch KO anyone. He's got decision wins, but so dominant and such a just force to be reckoned with. And the video that's come out this week of him at AKA training saying like, oh, if you're going to, I forget the exact quote, but if the training's hard, you go home and go cry. You're not meant to be here with me training. It's just like that dude can flip a switch, and he may not talk crazy trash or, again, take people's heads off, but what an intimidating force to just know that when you're in there, you have no answer, and you just have to deal with it until he finishes you off. It's kind of crazy.
You know, when you said it, my mind went to the fact that as a big man myself, my cardio is one of my weakest points. And I'm imagining just being forced into a 25-minute ground and pound on my back. I'm imagining like Edson Barboza fight.
It's waking up in cold sweats like a nightmare type.
Like I think he would. I believe him when he says I would drag him into the deepest waters and then drown him. I think I'd drown in there. I would drown.
Yes.
So I don't want to drown. I have no interest in drowning.
I love it.
Anyways, this is a fun one. I actually got this from Morning Combat, another. I'm sure most of you that are listening or watching have probably heard of them. Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. Check them out.
Yeah, a little bigger than us right now. You know.
Yeah. But they talked about this on their podcast, and I thought it was a really cool topic, so I thought we'd bring it here. Name 2 fighters who have yet to fight each other that you could see having a future trilogy of fights. This carries over from our trilogy conversation from last Wednesday, so it's still topical. We got Saturday.
And carries into a trilogy. Yeah.
So 2 fighters, and this doesn't have to be UFC. Hint, hint. I mean, might be an obvious one.
Yeah.
For outside the UFC, I don't know if you might not be thinking of it right now, but
I'll let you pick up on that one. I'm gonna go with one that is scheduled but technically hasn't happened yet. That kind of intrigues me that there could be a potential trilogy because I think both guys are so good and so elite in their weight class. What are your thoughts on a potential trilogy down the line, of course, the first fight having not happened yet, between featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, and Brian Ortega? Because I'm very intrigued at how their styles will play out in this first title fight come hopefully September, I think is what we discussed and was rumored. So I just think that the way both guys carry themselves, they're always going to have this season The Ultimate Fighter behind them. We've seen it begin to pick up a little bit more chirpy. So there is a bit of a rivalry that is brewing. They're ultra competitive. 2 of the most elite level guys, of course, throw Max Holloway in there too, the top 3. And then there's a pretty large gap, I feel, at least at featherweight. And you got Volkanovski, who's as well-rounded as they come, can wrestle, can strike, can grapple, do all the good stuff. Then Ortega, known as the jiu-jitsu ace, but you see his fight against Korean Zombie last year where he really flipped a switch and looked better than ever on the feet. I think it is something that, come September when they fight for the first time, it might not be the last time we see them in there with one another. Kind of a random one, but I don't know. It's just the way that they match up with one another.
It's going to be kind of random no matter who you pick, right? Because
That's
these
also
are two
true.
guys that have never fought before.
Yeah.
In this case, I don't think that's one that's like too out there or anything like that. My only, I guess, hold up on it is if I see two guys fighting 3 times in their career, and the first one's going to be for a belt, in this case for Ortega and Volkanovski, then you have to imagine the next 2 are probably going to be for a belt.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I see those 2 holding that top spot when you have a guy like Max Holloway just waiting right there. I guess it doesn't have to be that way. It could be, they're not fighting for a belt. Maybe it's a number 1 contender fight at some point. I don't know. I think Max Holloway has a trilogy that's still yet to be resolved with Volkanovski technically, which might end up turning into a best of 5 for all we know.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that's the only hold up I have, but otherwise I definitely think that Ortega, with the growth he's shown, like that stylistically, that's a very interesting matchup for a set of 3. I'm going to go with, this is one that actually was presented on Morning Combat, so I'm not the first one to bring it up. It's a fight that's already booked, but hasn't happened yet. It's a Bellator matchup.
I knew it.
Patricio Pitbull, AJ McKee.
Yeah.
I mean, how would I go with anything else?
Yeah.
I mean, these 2, and who knows? This first fight might suck, or it might be super one-sided for Pitbull, and then it's just kind of like, well, that was fun. But I just really could see, even if Pitbull wins this matchup the first time, I really could see him and McKee just having fighting, kind of like GSP and Matt Hughes back in the day.
Yeah.
With the first fight, you got, Pitbull, who's the established veteran, the top of the division. And then you got McKee, who would be the GSP in this case, the young, really trying to,
hungry lion.
The future, if you will.
Yeah.
But maybe just a bit too soon. And he gets taken out in the first fight. However, he brings himself back and takes that top position in the next 2 fights and wins the trilogy. That's how I could really see that happening with someone like AJ McKee.
It could essentially turn into like a passing of the torch.
Yeah, this could maybe be too soon for him in the first one, but then 6 months, a year, whatever from now, he could be right back up there and just a smarter, more mature, more experienced fighter. It's entirely possible. That's the one that I just don't see any other one that would top it, in my opinion.
I like that one, man, especially going outside of the box, going to Bellator. You don't get huge names out of there, but when you have the 2 of the arguable biggest names they've got squared up in July, I can't wait for that fight, man. I love that one.
We're going to transition back to UFC 264. You guys thought we were done? We're not.
Nah.
One of the biggest prospects on that card that we didn't bring up earlier, because he's on the main card, is Mr. Sean O'Malley.
Yeah.
Scheduled to fight Luis Smolka. Is now fighting Chris last name.
Yeah, I forget how to say
Starts with an M, but I don't. We'll figure it out on Friday. So Sean O'Malley has had an interesting UFC run so far. And since he is one of the biggest prospects in the whole company,
and biggest names,
it's a very fair comparison right here to look at. Why is the UFC bringing Sean O'Malley up at such a different pace than usual for their prospects? And when the person that put this question proposed it, I definitely cleaned it up a bit. It was definitely more negatively like, why is the UFC not pushing him more? Why is he not fighting? I think the obvious one is that he did lose.
He did lose.
To which Marlon Vera, a very good opponent.
Yeah, Chito Vera plays a big factor in this question.
I mean, he does, but okay, so you lose to Marlon Vera, and then after that he fights. Who did he fight after that? It was who's the guy that
Thomas Almeida.
Yes, Thomas Almeida, a one-time looked like another really big prospect, but a guy who hadn't won a fight, I think, since 2017 or something like that.
He was on a 3-fight knockout loss streak.
And it carried into that one. It carried over in this fight too. So then he goes from Thomas Almeida to schedule Luis Smolka. Is Smolka, in your eyes, a step up from Almeida at this point? Or did you feel like that was just more of a lateral step, or is he going back? Is he going down?
I'd say lateral is a good way to – when they announced Luis Smolka, I was very surprised because I really thought, well, maybe they are going to do like a top 15 guy at this point.
Yeah.
He bounced back from the loss to Cheeto. Cheeto's ranked now, so, and I think he legitimately lost to Cheeto, but people say the calf and the leg, and he walks around with a 13-0 shirt still. Get into that all you want, but I thought he was going to bounce back, and he did against Almeida, and then I thought, okay, number 15, number 14 guy, we'll see what they do. Nope, they schedule Luis Smolka. Unfortunately for him and O'Malley, he falls out. Now we get a guy that's making his UFC debut. He's 9-4. A lot of backlash in the community about that fight announcement. So, overall, I guess the question, why are they bringing him up at a different pace? It is odd because he is a Contender Series guy. And you look at some of the Contender Series people. Alex Perez, for God's sake, fought for a title already. Macy Barber, they pushed very quickly, who was undefeated, but now she has since lost. So maybe they're seeing that some of their Contender Series, I don't want to say experiments because they're all great fighters, but they pushed them all the way to a certain point to a title fight, or even Ige just fought Zombie. Macy Barber fought Roxanne, who was like top 8, I think, when they fought, and they faltered and they lost. And it takes away some of that momentum. So maybe they're just being a little bit more careful with a guy like O'Malley. But he has such a loyal – he has like a love-hate fan base. You either love the guy or you hate the guy. We're pretty in the middle. I enjoy listening to him talk, and he's really good in the octagon. But it's just – it's odd because there is a star power here more so than those other Contender Series people. I will give it that. So maybe that's why they know what – right now at his current skill level, what's a good stylistic matchup and what's a bad one. I don't know.
I do think a lot of his fights are to his benefit stylistically. Yeah. I think people are being a little unfair on the UFC and on Sean O'Malley for his late replacement opponent here. I get it. It's a guy making his UFC debut. But, I don't know what you guys were really expecting. If it was kind of proven that he obviously, the Ricky Simon fight, that Ricky looks kind of silly in that exchange. I'm just going to be honest. Ricky kind of calling for the fight, but then it's but you can't, you have to fight at 145 or 140, whatever he said. It's I don't know. I think if I'm Sean O'Malley, I'm going to stick to Bantamweight. Mm-hmm. Regardless, my whole point here is that I think that people are being too harsh on the UFC in this fight coming up just because the fight was, a week out? You want Sean O'Malley on the card. You had a guy who was willing to step up, who could make bantamweight. I'm sure maybe one of these other guys that tweeted might have wanted the fight, but who knows, man? I don't know how these communications go when it comes to finding opponents. Ray Borg threw his name out there, but Ray Borg's not even with the company anymore.
Brian Keller.
Yeah, just who knows? Sure, they might tweet that they want the fight, but are they able to make the weight? That's what annoyed me about the Ricky Simone, because I like Ricky Simone. You love Ricky Simone.
Yeah.
He looks silly in my opinion because and now I can't even remember all that happened with it, but it was really the guy, he claimed he wanted the fight, which, he did, but he wanted it at essentially featherweight. Mm-hmm. And, to me, that's just, don't get on Twitter and talk a big game and say, I want this fight. I want to step in and be the opponent. But only if you fight me 10 pounds heavier. It's just, come on, dude. Just take it easy. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you have any opinion on that?
The fight getting made specifically for 264, no. And then again, just in terms of his career as a whole, I think it is just they see some other Contender Series people have faltered, and they know that O'Malley's the biggest star from the show, and they want to be careful. At the end of the day, this guy could be a needle mover for the company at some point. He made, what did he co-main for DC and Stipe at 252, or he was on the main card of that one too. Co-main. So, that tells you right there what they think of him. And that was against Eddie Wineland, another unranked guy.
That was Marlon Vera.
Oh, that one was Marlon Vera? Okay.
He opened the main card
With Eddie.
250 with Eddie Wineland. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, I mean, I just think that kind of shows where they think they can take O'Malley and why they're just being a bit more careful. It's just really matchup based for him right now.
Probably doesn't help that he got lucky with the Andre Sukumtoth fight.
Yeah, people forget about this. Why don't you remind them real quick?
Yeah, where I don't even remember if it was Sukumtoth that like did a, kind of like what Vera did. Like I don't know.
It was his ankle again. Yeah,
but he rolled his ankle or something in the fight, broke his ankle.
Literally couldn't walk.
Couldn't walk, couldn't put any weight on it, and Sukumtoth just goes for the takedown and rides the rest of the fight in top position, but loses. Like O'Malley lost. He
was already
round,
down, yeah.
But it ended up being a 29-28 across the board for O'Malley, and it should have been. So Sukumtoth looks pretty stupid, pretty silly there, and O'Malley carries on. But that really should have been O'Malley's first loss right there.
Yeah, and that's a guy that's not even in the UFC anymore. So.
And then it happens in similar fashion with Marlon Vera. It's like, is this always going to be a problem for Sean O'Malley, or is this just a weird thing where it happened twice to, is it just bad luck? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that Marlon Vera fight, I think that just sticks in their heads. Like, oof.
Got to be careful.
Like, even though a lot of people look at that fight and say, oh, Marlon got lucky, whatever. Disagree.
Yeah.
But you're entitled to your opinion. I'm just saying that I don't know. I think that's got to be the reason, because otherwise, if he had beaten Marlon Vera, he might be fighting for a title right now. I mean, truthfully speaking, I think that guy was getting the Conor McGregor route to. I mean, you get your first test, really. If he would have passed it, they would have probably given him top 5 or top. Very close to a title contention fight.
After Cheeto?
Yeah, I definitely think that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just he didn't pass that first test, so now they're really trying to be like, okay, we don't want to ruin this.
Right.
Ruin any momentum.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he'll have a good performance on Saturday, and maybe we start to look towards maybe a top 15 level guy next.
And if not, we're in for a very, very big betting upset, just saying. Just be on the lookout.
Yeah, that's true.
That would be crazy. Anyway.
Let's get into some sad questions.
This is where I leave, and you guys just look at my background.
So I kind of regret grouping the two most somber questions
at the end.
At the end. We do have a viewer question that's a little bit more positive. However, this one I honestly feel kind of bad talking about it, so we'll be brief on this one.
Yeah.
Which fighter do you fear will have a Chuck Liddell or BJ Penn level fall from grace? A fighter right now that's at the top of his game, who in a few years or whenever that chin goes, it's gone. And maybe you could put Tony Ferguson on there. I probably wouldn't, because the guy isn't getting finished necessarily, but
well, I'm just going to say one that's already happened. That pains me to say, but I have to man up here and just let it out. Anderson Silva. Now, granted, he's looking good in boxing right now, but his departure from the UFC and MMA was very somber. I mean, we were talking losing, 6 of his last 7 of his last 8, and then the one against Brunson, you argue he should have lost. But then I thought he beat Bisping. Nevertheless, the guy ended with knockouts and had other knockouts squeezed in there. Of course, he did have some competitive bouts, I will say, but especially when you see him go out the way he did last Halloween against Uriah Hall, you hate to see that. But in terms of active guys right now, Noah, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt me.
You got to rip the Band-Aid off.
Well, he's on my wall right there. Our Ohio boy, Stipe Miocic. Now, I don't think he's going to go out and, lose 6-7 straight. But we saw him just lose the belt to Ngannou. We saw him get brutally knocked out by DC. Now, granted, he bounced back and 1-2 there against him. But this is a guy that can get hit, and he has shown a susceptible chin and has got knocked out. And I know Ngannou's a different beast, and I know the DC shot he didn't see it coming. But at the end of the day, it's still your chin getting rocked. And especially when you're at heavyweight, it makes it even more the case to go out in very, brutal fashion. So as much as I hate to say this, and I don't necessarily think it will happen, but I fear, and that's in the question here, fear it could happen should he continue long enough. But at the end of the day, Stipe, the greatest heavyweight of all time, damn it, he's going to go out on a shield no matter what. That I can always know for Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, that's a good one because you know how big of fans we are of Stipe. However, I didn't go that direction because I think Stipe might only have like another fight left, and then, unless he wins the belt again somehow, and then we're back.
Yeah.
But this one's actually probably gonna hurt you a little bit too. Max Holloway is gonna be my pick.
Oh boy,
the man who has absorbed more strikes than any other person on the active roster right now. Look, the guy looks incredible, but there's got to be a limit.
At some point, the chin has to go, right?
And he's withstanded more at this point than most have.
Than a human should. Yes.
So I kind of worry that this could happen sooner than later. But I also think Max is the type of guy who's just going to keep trying to get
going
it back in there. And I don't even like talking about it, but that's who I foresee, if I had to guess, someone that I worry.
You fear it could happen.
Yeah. Not only do I fear that the chin might go just from the sheer volume of strikes accumulated over the career, but also someone who would be stubborn enough to keep getting back in there, being like, I know I can do it this time, and then it's just another one. It's just like,
right.
And I know that would just hurt little Dom over there, and
it would.
He'd be wearing the blessed hoodie and just be real sad.
Yes. Pure pain.
Another sad question.
Damn it, man.
But this involves UFC 264, so at least we're back on track. In our co-main event, Stephen Thompson, the NMF, if you will.
Yes, this is true.
One of the nicest guys in the world. He's really, a lot of talk is that if Stephen Thompson wins this fight, he's really knocking on the door for a title shot, if not cashed his check, and now he's next up potentially. We still haven't got Usman versus Covington scheduled, so I don't know what's going on really with welterweight right now. So the question here, though, is I think what's kind of not being talked about is, even though it seems to be accepted that if Thompson wins, he's getting a title shot. But I think what's just as likely, but isn't really being factored in, is if he loses, I think that might be it for him. So the question here is, if Stephen Thompson loses at UFC 264, then where does he go from there? And sure, you might have to factor in, how does he look in the fight? Did he get finished? Did he, was it a war that he just barely lost, or what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think for me, if he loses this fight, and I'm trying to think of it like regardless of how close it is or whatever, I just think that at his age, and as being a guy who has fought for a belt multiple times in his past and didn't win it, I think that might be about it. Like, really, do I really foresee him if he loses Saturday? Do I foresee him fighting another top contender? I don't know. I really could see, if he loses, I could see him and Masvidal happening, actually. That would be.
Dare I say, do you believe this is a crossroads fight then for Stephen Thompson?
It is. It's got to be, because sure, everybody wants to talk about that, how good of a place he's in, because if he wins, title shot.
Yeah.
But if he loses, there's no title shot.
Yeah, I think that's something I can't agree with you on, is I think if he loses, he won't get another chance to fight for a belt. Yeah, I agree.
I just think, I don't want to go too far into I'm not saying we have to talk about what opponent's next or whatever, but more so just we agree that a title shot would probably be all but not
all but done. It would essentially be fighting, do
you think he would still fight, some relative high contenders, or do you think he tries to find some maybe more money fights? Maybe he tries to go fight a Diaz or a Masvidal. Like, is that in the cards for him, or?
I can't see Wonderboy in like a money fight situation. I think again, you do have to factor in his age. He is 37, 38 years old. He's been competing very, very long. He's been doing MMA since he was 3. So, because this guy was an undefeated kickboxer, has like 100 kickboxing fights. He's been through the ringer. So, yeah, if he loses here, I think maybe not retirement. I don't want to say something like that, but he would fight other up-and-coming guys. I mean, we saw his last 2 fights were essentially that. Luke Hay and then Jeff Neal. I think it would be fights kind of like that should he lose to Gilbert Burns here.
They're just going to really try to feed him to the next batch.
The guys that are coming into the top 10.
Yeah. So he's going to be more like a gatekeeper almost.
Yeah, and he said that is not in his plans. That is not what he wants with his career. So he's got a big statement to make at UFC 264.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see if he does lose, kind of where his head's at afterwards. Is he in his head? Has he already accepted like my next loss is I'm done, or is it
keep trucking
business as usual? What is it?
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap it up here. We're gonna bring it back to a little more positive note. This is our viewer question.
Yeah.
Shout out to Michael, guy that we graduated high school with, or we went to
not with, but yeah,
I mean we went to high school with him. Good long-time viewer of the podcast, so appreciate the support. His question's about Henry Cejudo, Dom.
Yes.
I mean, I know you already know this, but I'm just setting it up because I'm talking to you right now. And Henry Cejudo, a guy who literally from the moment he retired has not stopped barking and chirping at people.
What a guy.
So this question is, if Henry Cejudo returned, could he win back the flyweight and or bantamweight titles? And then he elaborated on the bantamweight part to consider either opponent between Aljo and Jan, since obviously it was like Jan might be probably the better. But I don't know. I don't want to assume what anybody thinks, but
just Jan, the controversy in there.
It looked like Jan was going to win that fight before it happened.
Yeah.
So, what do you think here? Let's start with flyweight.
I was going to say let's tackle flyweight first, right?
And my biggest question would be: could Henry Cejudo make flyweight at this point?
Ooh, that is a good question because we do, you look at recency when he retired, he was at bantamweight, so that is a good point. He's a thick guy. I mean, he always has been a pretty built, muscular dude.
But he's also like 5'3".
But he is also very short, yes. So I think he could still make the weight. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an Olympic gold medalist, a guy that's been there and done that in the wrestling room. He's a guy that knows his way around weight cutting. So I think he could make the weight, and I think a fight between him and, of course, we'll go with the current champ, so Brandon Moreno. That's a very, very fun stylistic fight because Moreno, granted he's not the Olympic gold medalist wrestler, that Cejudo is. He does kind of have similar strengths to Cejudo where he's a great grappler, very good jiu-jitsu, and on the feet, the way he looked against Davis and Figueiredo in the rematch, he may even be better than Cejudo in the striking department. So I think that is a very, very interesting stylistic clash. Could he win the belt back? Yes, Henry Cejudo is one of the best fighters we've seen in the UFC, regardless of how long he was there and how many fights he had. And for that very reason, I think he could win that belt back. He could beat Brandon Moreno, but will he? We'll see. But I think that's a very cool fight.
I think we need to take it a step further than that, Dom. Does he beat Brandon Moreno?
Does he beat Brandon Moreno?
I say yes. I do. I think really highly of Henry Cejudo's skill set, and I know he's been gone for about a year at this point. And even when he was right before he retired, it's not like he was super active really at that point. But the guy is, in my opinion, the best all-around combat sports athlete of all time. If you take into account the Olympic gold and the titles he's won in the UFC, I don't think you can really put anybody over him in terms of accolades. And I think even though Moreno is a great, great fighter, and I love the potential he has as a flyweight champion, I just think Henry Cejudo would be too much for him. And a lot of that does come to the grappling, which I know Moreno is also good. But, I mean, Cejudo is just going to be a lot stronger in there than Moreno is.
Yeah.
And you do pose a good question about their abilities on the feet. I would say, though, that Cejudo he made a lot of strides in his striking towards the end there. And, I mean, even doing a bit of a karate stance at times. And so he's a bit of a puzzle, and I really do think he would beat Brandon Moreno.
All right, if you're forcing me to do it, no. Brandon Moreno, and still, I just think if we're going off of, recency bias as well, obviously the last time we saw Cejudo was up a weight class at 135. But for Moreno, that performance he just had to win the title against Figueiredo was literally flawless. I could not nitpick one bad thing he did in that fight. The fact that he was dropping Davison with a jab, piecing him up on the feet, acing him on the ground with the jiu-jitsu, ultimately gets the submission finish. I think in terms of well-roundedness, again, that striking, I think, is where he would get the biggest benefit in this one. In grappling, good enough to hold his own. I would honestly go with Moreno. I think he would be able to defeat Cejudo at flyweight.
Okay. But at bantamweight, interesting question posed here, because even though I think I speak for both of us when I say that, we look at a potential rematch with Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling going Peter Yan's way, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Despite that, I actually think Aljo might be just as tough, if not tougher, of an opponent for Cejudo here.
It's all about the styles, right?
Because Aljamain is so good on the ground as well, and he's a bigger guy than Cejudo. They're different styles, which I think this is tough. These are good questions.
Yes.
Even though I think Aljo would make Cejudo have to really work for any sort of ground game in that fight. Again, I looked at the strengths the growth he made in his striking. You look at that Demetrius Johnson fight where, yes, I know he was going for a lot of takedowns, but when the fight was on its feet, he looked very good. Yeah. And even Marlon Moraes, I thought that fight he really held his own on the feet as well. I'm going to go with Henry Cejudo over Aljamain Sterling.
Henry Cejudo beats Aljamain Sterling, loses to Peter Yan.
There we go.
I just wanted to rip it off.
Peter Yan is too well-rounded in my opinion.
I see Peter Yan not losing for a very long time, if I'm being honest.
Corey Sandhagen is the only guy I give a chance.
Yeah, and I went into the fight with Aljo and Yan, by the way. I picked Aljamain Sterling. And in that performance from Yan, I was like, oh, well, this guy is a bad mother effer. So, that's how I think it would.
Is there any other reason why, like, maybe you think he would beat Aljo? Just because I don't know if I'm giving my reasoning very well.
I think on the feet, actually, he'd be able to point fight better on the feet, and the way he moves around, especially that karate stance that he did implement later on. I think that would fare well against a guy like Aljo, who, yes, is good on the feet, but a guy that ultimately does want to grapple. And I don't know if his grappling is still going to be good enough for Henry. So, like at flyweight, I saw the grappling pretty close with Moreno, but Moreno getting the better end on the feet. But in this, 135 pounds against Sterling, I think Cejudo better on the feet and ultimately better on the ground. So he just checks the boxes for me in that one. But Peter Yan, striking is second to none at 135 pounds. I think it's just
his takedown defense is so good.
His takedown defense is insane. This is a guy that, by the way, is a great wrestler. This is a guy from Russia. All they know is eat, sleep, and breathe wrestling, and he knocks people out in points fight and boxes incredibly on the feet. So that's how good Peter Yan is. I think it just says more about Yan, to be truthful, than like where Cejudo stands in the current mix at 135 pounds.
Yeah. No, I think Cejudo really is still a championship level fighter at both weight classes. I don't know about featherweight because I know he really likes the idea of going there. I don't know how much I don't know how much damage I see him doing there. But I think at those two lightest weight classes, I think Henry Cejudo is a supreme talent and would be very competitive against the top of the heap in both. Would he win all of them? Maybe not. But out of both weight classes, I look at Peter Yan as the best
elite,
pound for pound, the best fighter in those two weight classes. So
yeah, and I just want to add on, just to finish off of this question. Again, thank you, Michael, for the question. Ultimately, it comes down to, does Cejudo return? So, Noah, in your eyes, will Henry Cejudo ever step foot in the UFC octagon again? Just give me a yes or no. That's all. We don't even need a description. Do I need a drum roll?
No, it's fine.
Well, I'll go first if you want me to.
No.
All right, that's it for the Reddit Roundtable.
So, thank you guys for listening or watching today's episode 115, MMA Reddit Roundtable. Again, you can leave your own questions by either commenting on maybe this video or any of our social media posts that you'll see, or you could leave a voice message and we'll include it in the podcast if you go to our Anchor page.
Yes, please do.
We're going to plug now. First, I just want to say Friday, MMA weekend preview, but the only big thing happening this weekend as far as events is UFC 264. So it's gonna be just like the good old days where we deep dive these UFC cards. So we're definitely gonna be going deep on that one. A lot of fight announcements too to go over.
Yeah.
And anything that happens between now and Thursday.
True.
We'll have to wait and see. But until then, Dom, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram at dslee14, and more importantly, follow us, like all of our stuff, interact with us, vote on our polls. Whatever I say, you just go do, please. You can find the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at ntbaker_. There is a link in my bio to the link tree that gives you all the links to all the platforms that the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. And the Anchor page, as I just mentioned, is on there as well. That's it. We're out, and we'll see y'all on Friday.